nobody in the world sympathizes with Hamas or any other terrorist group, but the kind of response which disproportionate response with which Israel has been killing innocent people, more than 65,000, most of them children and women, that has really shifted the public opinion, which we see this is reflected now in the form of France officially recognizing the state of Palestine, which I feel is a very carefully orchestrated diplomatic initiative supported by Saudi Arabia aimed at revitalizing the long stalled two-state solution.
Let's keep in mind that more than 100 countries already in the past recognized the Palestinian state. I didn't see any concrete action, and I'm not expecting any concrete action right now. But you know what? There's one question that all of these countries that created a major media event, a 3-hour media event in the UN, there's one question they miss asking, and I want to help them. And the question is, what do the Palestinian people want?
Let's go straight across to our guest. Joining me on Global Pulse tonight is Ambassador Ausaf Sayeed. He's former secretary to the Government of India, having served in the Ministry of External Affairs. So thanks very much for joining me on the show. Also with us from Tel Aviv is Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich, director of the American Jewish Committee, Israel, and also former IDF spokesperson. A little later on the show, we're going to be joined by Harold Hyman, senior journalist in France. Thanks to all my guests. Ambassador Ausaf Sayeed, let me begin with you. Do you believe, sir, that after years of reluctance, with Western nations, including the G7 powers, now rushing to recognize Palestinian statehood, with the exception of the United States, of course, signals Israel's growing isolation on the global stage? Is Israel more isolated today than ever before?
Yes, I think Israel is getting more and more isolated, following its continuous indiscriminate attacks, at different places. Of course, nobody in the world sympathizes with Hamas or any other terrorist group, but the kind of response which disproportionate response with which Israel has been killing innocent people, more than 65,000, most of them children and women, that has really shifted the public opinion, which we see this is reflected now in the form of France officially recognizing the state of Palestine, which I feel is a very carefully orchestrated diplomatic initiative supported by Saudi Arabia aimed at revitalizing the long stalled two-state solution. Now, everybody, who wants peace, they feel that this is the only way where peace can be achieved in the Middle East. For instance, from the Saudi perspective, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said the sole path to achieve, just and lasting peace is a two-state solution. The same sentiments were expressed by UAE, Egypt, and Jordan. So now coming back to your question, is Israel getting isolated? The fact that almost 156 out of 193 UN member states have already recognized Palestine, it goes on to say a lot. Now, if I quote, President Macron's, quote, he said, "We cannot wait any longer. The world, is approaching a point where peace would no longer be achievable." Now, more and more countries are believing that Israel is not interested in peace at all. That is also reflected in the most recent incident of, airstrikes on Doha, where the Hamas delegation was actually reviewing the proposal sent by the United States. So if they want to kill the people who are interested in sitting across the table and talking, then I really doubt what is the intentions. Now, if you just go back to certain statistics, if we like to tell you that there is definitely, which shows that there is definitely a broader shift in global sentiment towards Israel. Now, in many Western countries, the popularity of, the favorability towards Israel is at the historic lows. For example, even in a country which supports Israel, like Germany, it has gone down to 44%, reduced to 44%. France, 48%. Denmark, 54%. So these are the worst ratings which Israel has seen in the recent time. And only I think around 13 to 20% of the Europeans hold favorable views of Israel, compared to 60 to 70% who view it very unfavorably. Even in United States, it is a well-known fact that the younger population is shifting away from supporting, the Israel, and more of youngsters are talking about a balanced approach towards Israel and Palestinian problem. And the figure goes much higher if you go to other countries. For example, Turkey is 93% against, Indonesia 80% against, even in Japan it is 79%. So I think this is all a reflection that there is diplomatic pressure being put on Israel, and one to make it, recognize the international forums, give an emphasis on international law, respect humanitarian, rights of people, and UN resolutions. So I think in totality, I firmly believe that the isolation of Israel has already begun, and it may further increase if Israel doesn't take any concrete step towards formal talks with the various stakeholders.
All right. In fact, now there are threats that Israel could go ahead and annex all of West Bank, not to mention the deeper advancements that are already being made into the heart of Gaza City. Let me take this to our Israeli guest, Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich. You heard the ambassador there. He mentioned quite rightly that at least 150 of the 193 members of the UN General Assembly have now gone ahead and formally recognized Palestinian statehood. And in what should be a major setback to Israel, the latest set of countries to make such a move are Western nations that had thus far refrained from taking any such step. These include France, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Portugal. The fact that, with the exception of the US, even G7 nations are now rushing to condemn Israel's continuing war in Gaza and the recognition of Palestinian statehood. Would you not agree that Israel today does stand completely isolated by the international community?
So let me try and use a metaphor. Suppose we have a scale. And on one side of the scale, we have diplomatic pressure. We have 5 active, whether it's the Houthis in Yemen, which fire missiles a few times a week, or explosive drones, whether Hezbollah in Lebanon, still trying to rearm and rebuild its arsenal of weapons, whether it's the instability in Syria and some of the Iranian impacts still on the ground there, whether it's the West Bank and the rise of terror groups in the West Bank, and of course Gaza. And Iran is somewhere behind, quiet for now. So if I'm looking at the two sides of this scale, diplomatic pressure and 5 fronts, obviously the 5 fronts part will be more significant in the Israeli state of action and state of policy at this time. So let's keep in mind that more than 100 countries already in the past recognized the Palestinian state. I didn't see any concrete action, and I'm not expecting any concrete action right now. But you know what? There's one question that all of these countries that, created a major media event, a 3-hour media event in the UN, there's one question they miss asking, and I want to help them. And the question is, what do the Palestinian people want? And I want to give you the answer. According to Palestinian polls based in Ramallah, a poll center based in Ramallah, polling only Palestinians, has nothing to do with Israel or Israelis. 57% of the Palestinians oppose the concept of a 2-state nation. So if that is the case, and the vast majority of Palestinians do not want the Palestinian state, what do all of these countries know better? I want to give you another figure. when this poll asked the Palestinian, by the way, it's also applying to the Palestinians in the West Bank and also to the Palestinians in Gaza. And when they were asked, what is the best way to achieve your goals as a Palestinian people? Is it through negotiations or through peaceful popular resistance or armed struggle? Guess what? Between 40 something and 60 something percent of the Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, prefer the armed struggle. In that case, if the Palestinian people do not want a Palestinian state, if they prefer armed struggle, then what exactly are these countries suggesting? What do they want, and is it in the best interest of the Palestinian people and the world? I'm not
Miss
sure this is the
Miss
case.
Leibovich,
One thing is that
Miss
this kind of
Leibovich,
recognition
I'm not sure
come out.
where you're getting your numbers from, which survey you are quoting when you say a majority of Palestinians do not want a Palestinian state. I don't think a vast majority of people in this world are going to agree with that formulation that you've put forward, because this
So I
is a
invite you to
conflict
go
that
to the
goes back
website.
decades.
I
And,
invite you to go
the
to the
demand of
website
the
of the
Palestinians
Palestinian
from the
Call
very
Center,
beginning, going back decades, ma'am, has been the creation of a
pcsrnews.org
Palestinian state.
in
But let me
Ramallah, and
ask
look
you
at the
this
numbers
question.
themselves.
Okay, I just want
You
to
can
ask
see
you
that
another
the call
question.
center
You
in
can quote,
Ramallah,
you can quote
pcpsr.org.
certain,
You can see
you
the
can
numbers.
quote certain figures that you have. I'm sure I can quote many figures telling you
It's
that
not
a vast majority of
penetrated.
Palestinians
It's a
do
very
want a
respected call
state.
center in
Okay,
Ramallah
I want to
that
ask
has
you
been
this.
calling the Palestinian street for 20 years. It's not something that I'm taking out of the, something in the
I
world. This is
don't
really a
know where you
respected
get
center.
these figures from, because nobody is going to believe that the people of that the Palestinian people do not want a Palestinian state. But I want to ask you a different question. I'm quoting the Spanish Prime Minister who recently spoke at Columbia University. I'll tell you what he said. Because the argument that's put forth by Israel for its actions in Gaza and the continuing war, which is nearing the 2-year mark, is that this is self-defense. Now, the Spanish Prime Minister said defending your country is one thing, but killing 60,000 civilians, bombing hospitals, and starving children to death is something else entirely. We are witnessing one of the darkest tragedies of the 21st century unfold right before our eyes. And the French President Emmanuel Macron has told the United Nations General Assembly the only solution to this age-old conflict is a two-state solution whereby Palestine and Israel exist side by side in harmony and security. What's your response to what leader after leader after leader is now saying?